If you are over 60 and you drink coffee every single morning, I need you to pay very close attention to what I am about to share with you. Because there is one specific habit surrounding your daily cup of coffee that research now links directly to accelerated cognitive decline in older adults. And the part that will genuinely surprise you is that it has almost nothing to do with the caffeine itself. Most seniors have been told the same things about coffee for decades. Too much caffeine is bad for your heart. Coffee dehydrates you. Cut back if you have anxiety. And while some of that carries a grain of truth, none of it addresses the real danger hiding inside your morning routine. The danger that a growing body of neuroscience research is now pointing to very clearly. I am Dr. Steven, and this channel exists to bring you the latest peer-reviewed research on senior health, translated into clear, practical information you can actually use. If you have not subscribed yet, please do that right now, because every single week we cover the science your doctor simply does not have time to explain during a 15-minute appointment. Now let us get into exactly what is happening and why your morning coffee ritual may be working against the very brain you are trying to protect. First, let me be clear about something important. Coffee itself, when consumed correctly, is not the enemy. In fact, a landmark study published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease found that moderate coffee consumption in midlife was associated with a 65% decreased risk of developing dementia and Alzheimer's disease later in life. Caffeine has documented neuroprotective properties. It blocks adenosine receptors in the brain, which reduces neurological inflammation and supports the clearance of amyloid proteins, the same proteins that accumulate in the brains of Alzheimer's patients. So coffee, in its basic form, is actually one of the most studied and most consistently protective dietary habits for brain aging when consumed appropriately. The problem is what 90% of seniors are adding to that coffee, and what they are doing with it, and when they are drinking it. Because those three variables are quietly turning a potentially protective habit into one that accelerates exactly the kind of brain damage they are trying to avoid. Let me walk you through each one. The first problem: what you are adding to your coffee. Walk into any kitchen in America and look at what sits next to the coffee maker. Artificial creamer, the powdered kind, the flavored liquid kind, the kind that comes in pumpkin spice and French vanilla and hazelnut and stays fresh on a shelf for months without refrigerating. Approximately 60% of American coffee drinkers use non-dairy creamer regularly. And among adults over 65, that number climbs even higher because many seniors have been told to limit saturated fat from dairy, so they switched to what seemed like a healthier alternative years ago and never looked back. Here is what those creamers actually contain. The primary ingredients in most commercial non-dairy creamers are partially hydrogenated oils, which are a source of artificial trans fats, corn syrup solids, and a list of artificial flavoring compounds and preservatives. Even products now labeled zero trans fat can legally contain up to 0.5 grams of trans fat per serving under FDA labeling rules. And most people pour significantly more than one serving. Why does this matter specifically for your brain? A study published in the journal Neurology followed over 6,000 adults and found that higher dietary intake of artificial trans fats was associated with a 75% increased risk of developing Alzheimer's disease compared to those with the lowest intake. The researchers described the connection as dose-dependent, meaning the more trans fat consumed regularly over time, the stronger the association with cognitive decline. The mechanism is well understood. Artificial trans fats trigger chronic neuroinflammation. They disrupt the integrity of cell membranes throughout the brain, including the myelin sheath that insulates your nerve fibers. They raise LDL cholesterol while lowering HDL, damaging the small blood vessels that deliver oxygen to brain tissue. And in older adults, whose blood-brain barrier is already more permeable than it was at 40, these compounds cross into brain tissue more readily than they do in younger people. The habit of adding processed creamer to coffee every single morning, multiplied across years and decades, creates a consistent low-level inflammatory burden on the aging brain that accumulates quietly and invisibly until it is not invisible anymore. Comment below right now and tell me your age and what you currently add to your morning coffee. Creamer, sugar, milk, or black? I want to understand what our community is actually doing every morning because the patterns matter and your response genuinely shapes what I cover next. The second problem, the sugar. The second ingredient hiding in most senior coffee routines is sugar. Sometimes it is spoonfuls of white sugar added directly. Sometimes it is flavored syrups. Sometimes it is sweetened creamers that deliver 5 to 7 grams of added sugar per serving before a single bite of breakfast has been eaten. Here is what elevated blood sugar does to the brain specifically, and this connection is so well established that researchers have begun calling Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes in the scientific literature. Your brain consumes roughly 20% of your body's total glucose supply despite being only 2% of your body weight. It is the most metabolically demanding organ you have, and it depends on a tightly regulated supply of glucose delivered efficiently through insulin signaling. When blood sugar spikes repeatedly, which happens every time you consume significant added sugar on an empty stomach, a process called glycation occurs. Glycation is when excess sugar molecules attach themselves to proteins and fats throughout the body, including inside the brain, forming what researchers call advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. These compounds are directly toxic to neurons. They increase oxidative stress, trigger inflammatory cascades, and impair the brain's ability to clear the amyloid and tau proteins most associated with Alzheimer's pathology. A 2018 study published in Diabetologia followed over 5,000 participants for a decade and found that higher average blood sugar levels, even within ranges not classified as diabetic, were significantly associated with faster rates of cognitive decline in older adults. Every increase in average blood sugar corresponded to a measurable reduction in memory and cognitive test performance. When you add sugar to your morning coffee and drink it before eating any food, you are delivering a concentrated glucose spike directly into your bloodstream on an empty stomach. Your pancreas scrambles to respond. Insulin floods your system. Blood sugar swings sharply down, and that repeated daily roller coaster, multiplied across years, leaves a mark on the brain that cognitive testing eventually reveals. Let me tell you about a patient I will call Richard. He was 73 years old, a retired engineer, sharp and methodical his entire career. Over about 18 months, his wife noticed he was becoming slower to recall names, losing track of conversations, and repeating questions he had asked 10 minutes earlier. His standard blood work came back unremarkable. His fasting glucose was 104, technically normal, but trending upward. When we sat down and went through his daily habits carefully, his morning routine became very clear. 2 large cups of coffee with 2 tablespoons of flavored liquid creamer each, and 2 teaspoons of sugar per cup. Every single morning for over 15 years without a second thought. He was starting every day with roughly 20 grams of added sugar and a meaningful dose of processed fat before 8 in the morning. We made 2 changes. We replaced the creamer with a small amount of whole milk or unsweetened oat milk. We eliminated the added sugar entirely and allowed 2 to 3 weeks for his palate to adjust. 4 months later, his wife reported that the repeated questions had stopped almost entirely. His recall in conversation had noticeably improved. Dietary change alone cannot diagnose or reverse cognitive decline, and Richard's case had multiple contributing factors, but systematically removing a consistent daily inflammatory and glycemic insult made a real and observable difference. The third problem, the timing. This is the one that surprises people the most because it involves something that seems completely harmless and even logical. Drinking coffee first thing in the morning, the moment you wake up, before eating anything, before doing anything else. Here is what is actually happening inside your body during that window. When you wake up, your body is in the middle of a natural cortisol surge. Cortisol is your primary stress and alertness hormone. It peaks in most adults between 6 and 8 in the morning as part of what researchers call the cortisol awakening response. This surge is your body's natural mechanism for waking you up, sharpening your focus, and preparing your system for the demands of the day. Caffeine works partly by stimulating additional cortisol production, and by blocking adenosine, the chemical that makes you feel sleepy. When you drink coffee during your natural cortisol peak, you are stacking a caffeine-driven cortisol boost on top of a cortisol surge that is already happening. The result is not more alertness. Research from the Uniformed Services University published in the journal Psychopharmacology found that drinking caffeine during your natural cortisol peak produces significantly less cognitive benefit than drinking it slightly later, while simultaneously increasing caffeine tolerance faster, meaning you need more coffee over time to feel the same effect. More relevant for brain aging is what chronically elevated morning cortisol does to the hippocampus, the brain structure most essential for forming and retrieving memories. Research published in Nature Neuroscience confirmed that sustained cortisol elevation is directly neurotoxic to hippocampal cells. The hippocampus is exquisitely sensitive to cortisol, and prolonged exposure causes measurable shrinkage of hippocampal volume over time. Drinking coffee the moment you wake up, before eating anything, repeatedly over years, contributes to a cortisol pattern that the aging brain is increasingly poorly equipped to manage. And because adults over 65 already show reduced hippocampal volume compared to younger adults as a normal feature of aging, compounding that with unnecessary cortisol amplification, every single morning is exactly the kind of silent accumulating damage that shows up years later on a cognitive assessment. The solution is straightforward. Wait 60 to 90 minutes after waking before having your first coffee. Eat something first, even something small, a handful of nuts, a piece of whole grain toast, a few bites of eggs. Eating before coffee blunts the cortisol response, stabilizes blood sugar before caffeine hits your system, and allows your natural morning cortisol to peak and begin declining before you add caffeine on top of it. You will actually feel more alert from the same amount of coffee, and you will be working with your brain chemistry instead of against it. What to do? Starting tomorrow morning. Here is the exact protocol based on everything the research supports. First, replace any artificial powdered or liquid creamer with a small amount of real whole milk, unsweetened almond milk, or unsweetened oat milk. If you enjoy a richer taste, a teaspoon of grass-fed butter or coconut oil blended into your coffee provides healthy fat without the inflammatory compounds found in processed creamers. This single swap removes the trans fat and artificial additive burden from your daily routine entirely. Second, eliminate or dramatically reduce added sugar in your coffee. If going cold turkey feels impossible, reduce by half for the first 2 weeks, then half again over the following 2 weeks. Your taste receptors genuinely adapt. Coffee that tastes unpleasantly bitter today will taste rich and satisfying in 3 to 4 weeks without any sugar at all. If you want a mild natural sweetness, a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon added to your coffee grounds before brewing has documented blood sugar stabilizing properties and adds a pleasant flavor with zero glycemic impact. Third, wait at least 60 minutes after waking before your first cup. Use that window to drink 12 to 16 ounces of plain water, which your body is genuinely depleted of after 7 to 8 hours without intake, and eat a small protein-containing breakfast. Eggs, Greek yogurt, or even a small handful of walnuts. Then have your coffee. You will be surprised at how differently you feel from the same amount of caffeine when your cortisol has already had a chance to peak naturally and your blood sugar is stable. Fourth, keep your total daily coffee to 2 to 3 cups maximum and finish your last cup before 2 in the afternoon. Caffeine has a half-life of 5 to 7 hours in most adults, and in adults over 65 that half-life extends further as the liver metabolizes caffeine more slowly. Coffee consumed at 3 in the afternoon is still actively interfering with your sleep architecture at 10 at night. And the quality of your sleep is one of the most powerful determinants of brain aging because deep sleep is when your brain runs its glymphatic waste clearing system, flushing out the very proteins most associated with Alzheimer's disease. Before making any significant dietary changes, particularly if you are managing diabetes, heart disease, kidney disease, or are taking blood thinners or medications that interact with dietary shifts, please discuss those changes with your physician first. These are general evidence-based guidelines drawn from published research, not personalized medical prescriptions. The bottom line. Your morning coffee has the potential to be one of the most genuinely protective habits in your daily life. The research on caffeine and brain aging when coffee is consumed correctly is remarkably positive. But the habit that 90% of seniors have built around that coffee, the processed creamer, the added sugar, the immediate post-waking timing, is quietly converting a protective ritual into one that adds daily inflammatory and metabolic stress to an aging brain that is already working hard to stay sharp. 3 changes. Replace the creamer. Remove the sugar. Wait 60 minutes before the first cup. That is all this takes. And the science is very clear about what those 3 changes can do over weeks and months for the brain you are going to depend on for the rest of your life. Comment below with one of these 3 responses. Comment switching if you are making these changes starting tomorrow. Comment your age and what you currently add to your coffee so our community can see where people are starting from. Or comment sharing if you know a senior in your life who drinks coffee this way every single morning without knowing what the research shows. If this gave you something genuinely useful today, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. Next week, I am covering the one breakfast food that research now links directly to elevated morning blood sugar in adults over 60. It is sitting in most refrigerators right now, and most seniors believe it is one of the healthiest choices they make. You will want to know before your next meal. I am Dr. Steven. Take good care of yourself, and I will see you next week.